Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. This episode is brought to you by AutoRescueTools.com and Isaac Rodell. If you are looking to get into module programming, but you are not sure what kind of laptop you're going to need or how to set it up for programming, Isaac is your guy. He can set up laptops specifically to do control module programming for specific brands with partitioned hard drives and all the software that you're going to need to do this. He also sells key cutting equipment, scan tools, and other diagnostic equipment. I bought some stuff from him in the past and the support is phenomenal. So I highly recommend checking out the website. Again, that's AutoRescueTools.com. The link will be in the show notes. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. Wanted to mix it up and try something new. So I'm going to bring you along with me on my day of doing mobile. I looked at my schedule and it's almost all diagnosis for me personally today. So I'm going to give you a little preview at each stop and give you any important notes and summary of what I find on each car. So it is 7 a.m. We're here in Maple Grove, Minnesota. I'm at my first stop looking at a 2008 Toyota Camry hybrid. I was actually here yesterday to begin the diagnosis. I was looking at another one for him, which is like a Porsche parasitic draw. That one was the radio, but on this Camry, it had a high voltage isolation fault. So high voltage battery, upwards of 300 volts. That system needs to be separate from the ground, the 12 volt system of the vehicle for safety reasons, obviously. And the system does a pretty good job of determining if there are any issues there, and it'll set a fault and shut down the hybrid system and all that stuff. It won't clear until you clear the code out. I use TechStream on these because there are not only the code that's set, the P0AA6 is the code, just high voltage isolation fault, but there's also detail codes if you look at the freeze frame. And if you use those detail codes and you use service info, it can dial you into exactly the part of the system that you need to check. So I had 526, and 526 is actually just a generic one. It gives you like all systems. And then there's also a 612 that sets eventually. The 612 dials you in a little bit closer to the high voltage battery area. And the next step that I need to do is remove the cover on the battery to access the smart battery unit. It has me do some isolation testing with a mega ohm tester that puts 500 volts into the circuits in order to test for a possible isolation fault, but you have to disconnect this computer that's inside of the battery, essentially the high voltage battery. So the shop was going to remove the cover so that we can access that module and do the testing. We're probably going to find a fault in the battery, but I want to get them an exact answer and let them know exactly what they need to do to fix it. This shop here actually rebuilds hybrid batteries quite often. They work on a lot of hybrid stuff. And so they want to know exactly what needs to be done or what needs to be fixed. So that's what we're doing. Once I get set up and do some tests, I will get back here and get a video up so you can see what we're doing. But let's get in the back of this Camry. We've got the battery partially disassembled. Now, of course, you want to be safe. Remove the safety plug here. Give it time to dissipate any voltage, and then you want to be safe working around these hybrid batteries. Now, if you're intelligent, you're thinking, you'll be okay. If you want to be really dumb, you can hurt yourself, so do be careful. We're using a mega ohm tester, and I'm following the procedure in SI to narrow down our isolation fault. Now, you can see I've got this on right now, and it's outputting 530 volts. And it's reading 4,000 mega ohms. If I touch, I got it clipped on ground over there. If I touch over here, Obviously we go down to nothing, there's continuity there, and it resets. Where I'm going to test here is each side of the safety disconnect. So if we go to the top side here, I've got, let's see if I can get on there. So we've got 30 mega ohms. 10 is the spec in SI, so we're over that. If I go to the bottom side here of this safety disconnect, we're at 1.5 mega ohms, which is below that 10 mega ohm spec. So essentially the problem is in the battery unit, and I have the smart unit disconnected over there, but the problem is in there. Basically we need to go in, there's a few different components that could be causing a leak. We got to check the high voltage relay, the converter, and the individual cells, but it's removal of the battery and disassembly, so that's what's going to fix this one. To recap, at the shop with the Camry, I talked to the technician there that does the hybrid work. You know, they don't do a ton of diagnostics. We usually do that for them, but for the rebuilding of the batteries, they do that. Replacement of the batteries, they do that. Transmissions, that sort of stuff, they dive into it. And what his plan is they actually have another unit there that'll go into that Camry ready to go. They're just going to pop that in, get that customer on the road, bill them appropriately, and then they're going to have me help them figure out exactly what is wrong with that pack. I have a feeling it's probably a cell, but there's a process in service information that has you go through component by component with a mega ohm tester to see, is it the high voltage relay, is it the converter, is it one of the cells, and you can dial it in and, you know, figure out exactly what's wrong. And then it's up to them, you know, how much of a complete rebuild do they want to do, but I can tell them where the fault is for sure. So I may go back and do that eventually, but I got paid for my time to get them to that point so they can get the car on the road. Next shop I'm at, I'm already here. I've got a Mitsubishi Lancer. They rebuilt the transmission, which I'm pretty sure is a CVT in this application. I want to say it's a 16. And right now it does not move after the rebuild, which is not a good sign. They should move, but he says if he clears the codes, he can get it to move a little bit, and then they come back and it won't move. So I'm gonna start with a scan, see what the codes are, go from there. So we're in this Lancer here, and the battery was dead, so I put a jump pack on it, got it fired up, and the transmission was making some interesting noises without me even trying to put it into gear. And then it coded, check engine light came on, and it doesn't move when you put it into gear. I have a code in the TCM as a P184B shift fork 4. Turn the engine off, clear the code. As soon as you start it back up, this resets. So I'm gonna research what this is. I mean, it seems to be pretty straightforward. There's something going on with one of the shift forks in this transmission, but I'll do a little research and then I'll follow up. So we're into this thing. You know, something is definitely broken in the transmission. You can pull up data PIDs as far as the shift fork positions, and there's 4 of them, and you can move the shifter, actually faulted, engage, and reverse. And although some of these move, number 1 will move, I don't see any movement from 4. I looked up the code, and there is a logic flow chart about position and RPM depending on the gear. We're not meeting that criteria, which is why it's failing. It appears to be that shift fork is not moving at all. I can clear the codes and nothing happens. Basically, you get down here, and the actual flow chart for diagnostics is to make sure that the CAN system works, that it communicates, and if it does and the DTC is present, you replace the transaxle. That's it. There's no other steps, and then you check again for the code after you replace the transmission. I'm not worried about a sensor in this case, at least not as far as something I have to deal with. The reason being is, if you take a look at this wiring diagram up, and often I'll use the wiring diagrams, I'm gonna shut the car off here. I'll use the wiring diagrams to help me understand the construction and how things are set up. And the reason I pulled up the diagram is so I could see, is there individual sensors for these shift forks? And although I don't have a circuit code, you know, is there potential we could have an issue with one of them? And there very well probably is, but it's all internal to the trans. Basically, if you look at the transaxle assembly here in the diagram, I have power, I have ground, I have cam lines, and then I have what seems to be some sort of signal line to the shifter assembly. That's it. So everything else is going to be internal inside of that transmission, and they just rebuilt it. So considering I can talk to this thing, I most likely got power and ground. Obviously I can double check that, but the odds of this being internal to the trans are very likely. So I can at least give them some specifics to say, hey, you need to look at shift fork 4 and dial them in a little bit closer there, but that's about as good as I can do. My job for transmission diagnostics, because I'm not a builder, especially with the twin clutch setup, is I need to tell them whether it's external or internal, and they take it from there. Oh, I did want to note, in the scan tool, there is a special function. Oh, gotta turn the key on. There is a special function for a shift, teach-in for the shift forks. I did try that. I tried a couple of these, and it did not do anything. It seems like we've got some sort of mechanical fault going on in there. And every time we get the same P184B. So the shop will be going back into the transmission, and that is about all we can do. On to the next one. All right, we are here on our next one. This is a 2003 Mercedes S-Class. I'm told that when you put the HVAC controls to hot, it doesn't get hot, it gets warm at best. They already replaced the thermostat, and they're wondering if it's a blend door issue, but this shop doesn't want to dive into old Mercedes electrical. Guess I can't blame them too much. I'm not entirely familiar with the HVAC setup on these, but I'm going to start with verifying the concern, see if I can tell if the blend door is moving at all. You know, a lot of times you can just tell by the airflow if the door is moving, and give it a scan. We'll go from there. I'll let you know what I find. So here's what I know so far. I got the engine warmed up, got it up to operating temperature, and the engine does get up to 190 degrees plus. So the coolant on the engine side of things is hot enough. I am not getting heat out of the vents. It's maybe warm, if that. I did move the blend door. It does seem to move. Like, I can get it to go all the way to cold. You can feel the difference in the airflow when you switch it, and it swings back the other way. So it seems like the blend door is working anyways. Not a guarantee, but it's moving. At least I can say that. There's no codes in the climate control system. Now, there's lots of codes in the car. I didn't notice anything right off the bat that pertained to this. But there's a lot of codes. It's an old Mercedes. I'm not too terribly surprised. But I focused on the climate control module itself. It has a lot of temperature sensors. And I can actually try and show you that here. Actually, I'll restart the video here so you can see the scanner. So this is connected to the climate control module, and it's reading the accurate in-car temperature. It tells you the engine temperature. What I also see, and this is, again, the engine's hot, we're 190 degrees. I shut the engine off for the recording, but it was just running. And these two temperature sensors that say left and right heat exchanger temperature sensor, this thing has a lot of temp sensors, those are reading about 75 to 80 degrees when this thing is running. So that's obviously too cold. So what I'm thinking right now is something is affecting coolant flow to the heater core. Is it something where they're restricted? Also, is there two separate heater cores? I don't know that just yet. It kind of looks like that might be the case, but are they plugged up? Is there a control valve? I'm going to read up a little bit more on this system and see if I can figure out how this works. and then we can do some more diagnosing from that point. Identifix actually has a pretty good write-up on this system. So if you want to learn about the HVAC system in one of these old Mercedes, they've got a great write-up. This is a diagram of the cooling system and heating system in this car. If you take a look right here, the A31 is what they're calling a left and a right duo valve. And really that's a heater control valve that's electric and controlled by the HVAC module. And it's going to control coolant flow to the heater core itself. And it looks like there's a left and a right, which would be for passenger and driver's side. So that's how they regulate the temperature on each side of the vehicle. It's a dual climate. Now, I pulled up the data PID for this in the scan tool just to see, is the module trying to do something with it? And I put the system, the passenger side to heat to full max temp, and then I turned the driver's side to cool setting. And like I said, the blend doors move, but the temperature doesn't get hot. You could see on the scan tool here that the numbers do change. So if I drive up the temperature on the driver's side here, we'll eventually see that number go up to 100%. So the control module actually does want to move these control valves. Now we have to find out, are they actually moving? And what's going on with coolant flow. It's really what we're down to now, is to see, are these valves doing what they're supposed to, and if they are, is there an issue with coolant flow through the heater core, or maybe something to do with the engine itself. Again, the cooling system seems to be okay. I'm not seeing signs of like a water pump not moving coolant, but we will find out. I'm gonna get under the hood and see what I can access. Okay, so I found the valves. They're down under the cowling here. If the camera will focus, there's two valves and then a coolant circulation pump as well. And the way this runs is there's hot coolant into the heater core and then two outs. And the outs are controlled by those two valves that are down there. And then there's also that coolant circulation pump. So basically what I wanted to do is to test to see, are those getting the signals? And they are. The pump is getting its signal, and I can command it with the scan tool, which is nice. The valves are also getting their signal. For the valves, I can feel them click. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily good. The pump I can't really feel too well, but it is drawing amperage. And it's tough to tell back there without pulling this windshield cowl out. So that's going to be the next step for the shop, is to pull this windshield cowl out. And what I'll have them do is yank the hoses off and just make sure that the heater core is not restricted. And if the heater core is not restricted, then we need to pull that valve out and give it a little bit more of an assessment, bench test the motor, bench test the solenoids, and just make sure everything's physically moving. But that's where we're headed on this one. The hose that's going in is like hot to the touch, and then the two that are coming out are lukewarm at best. So it's either the restriction in that core or maybe an issue with that valve, but we've got to get all this out in order to proceed with the next step. So I'm going to talk to the shop, have them do that, and we'll come back if we need to, unless they find the problem.
Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website. along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough.
All right, so we got a little bonus here. Mike is here with us. Hello. Dropping off a couple TCMs out of a Ford Focus. Well, actually one of them's out of a Fiesta, and if you've done any of the programming on these, it won't work Focus to Fiesta or Fiesta to Focus with the normal programming methods. Luckily, made myself a little cable, a little flex magic, and we're going to copy and paste the software. As long as the hardware is correct, which most of these are, you can look at the tag on the side to verify, but you can transfer the programming over using cloning software. And there's some other tools that'll clone these too. I think Mike Christopherson was the one who filled me in on Flex being a tool that can do this. So we're cloning it over, because if you try to do this just by plugging in the Fiesta one, you get communication codes with the cluster and it won't show the gear properly, because the Fiesta and the Focuses are obviously different. But shops will quite often get these mixed up, and we've got the solution. So looks like we are reading successful. All right. Serving its intended purpose. Now we've got some real fun here. 2003 Honda Accord. Customers kind of doing their own work. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 ignition, lock cylinder housings, and theft deterrent modules. And looks like some wires that are cut up and twisted together. Doesn't start. This one actually looks brand new. We got to figure out what's going on with this thing. I guess I'll start with this brand new one. We'll plug into it, see what we got for codes, see what happens when I crank it. We'll go from there. Let's make it happen. All right, I'm gonna do a little swap-gnostics here, but what I ended up finding, let me pull this key out of here, it's not dinging at you, was the new one that they got, and I don't know where they got this from. These chips are actually wrong for the vehicle. They're a 48 ID for the chip, and I read that with the Key Tool Max. So you basically, you hit read transponder with a key in there. I can actually hit it, and it'll show you the chip type of the key that you're working with. So this is a 46, so this one's actually right for the vehicle. This one is the original, which is what I was using it off of. These ones are 48, so it wouldn't program. So I mixed and matched, and one of these tumblers will turn with any key, because if you look, these two keys are different, but I can start it with both. I managed to program both these keys in, match this immobilizer module to the vehicle, and they start and run with both of these keys now. I'll let him take it from there. If he wants to use one of the other lock cylinders that's matched, to a key, we can do that. I could probably get the correct key and cut it to this new one if he wants to use it. I'll leave the ball in their court, but we got it running, and we know what type of key to use. I mean, obviously, if we were supplying the parts, we would have gotten the right one in the first place. But yeah, simple enough. Autel IM608 is a beast for Honda immobilizer stuff, at least of this era. And then Key Tool Max is also really handy to figure that stuff out quickly. Same shop, another pile of a vehicle here. We got a 2006 PT Cruiser. Basically, his key is broken. I have the blade and the remote head. It's one of the triangle styles. It's busted off. I can still read the chip in this, and I used the Key Tool Max to see what the chip was in here. And he provided me with a couple keys. This gray head one is actually for something older. That's not going to work for this one, but this triangle head one seems to be the correct key. It looks aftermarket, so no guarantees. I'll get his authorization before I cut it and attempt to program it. We'll give that a shot and see what happens. All right, using the Triton bought from Isaac Rodell, we are going to decode There's our cuts. Alright, we are programming a key. Let's see if Autel can do the trick here. Establishing vehicle communication. Learning successful. Key is 4. Do you want to learn the next key? No, we're just adding the one. I was able to use the head and the blade of the other one to begin this process. So we'll hit no. And number of keys is 4. We started with 3. We added 1. Red light is out on the dash. And she runs. Now, the question is, will the remote work? Oh, look at that. It looks like they got the right one, so new key. Onward and upward. They've set the meth head trap. The next one, we got a 2017 Maserati Levante. I think I'm saying that right. It is a no start, a crank no start after there was a fire under the hood and the shop replaced the engine harness. Whew, so we're gonna see what happens here. I was actually on this one yesterday. I didn't have service info. Shout out to Mario Rojas for helping me out. But this is just a fancy Chrysler. If you look, this is the like push button off of a Chrysler. But I'm using the iScan. It's good for this sort of stuff. Let's scan this thing and see what we got. So the codes weren't too helpful. One of them's for COM with the all-wheel drive, invalidated from the ABS, and then something about the auto start switch. Nothing really leading me. Didn't see anything obvious in data, so I'm gonna do a spark check. This is my I'm by myself spark check. I have this plugged into a coil, and we're gonna see if we got spark. Well, let's go. There it is. So I ended up pulling this line, the main supply to the high pressure pump off. The scan tool readings were showing fuel pressure, but there was none. Fuse 51, which is that one, is missing. That's for the fuel pump relay. We're gonna put one in and see what happens. Come on, baby, let's go. Oh, I got it to pop a few times, but not actually start. I think we're making progress. The fuel pump's running now, the low side. We're building some pressure. I should probably get a gauge on it to see what it actually is. I don't trust the scan tool. It went up because it was at 5 bar when there was 0 pressure. So I took the line off and there was nothing in there. And now I've got some pressure. It went up 3 bar. That's like 43 PSI. So it went up to something. I don't know if it's enough. Now, the thing is, if you look at the gauge, it is on empty. So I don't know how much gas is actually in this thing. And I'm wondering if this was from the auction because it has fuses missing. And even if there is a little bit of gas in the bottom of that tank, if it's any good. So I have their tech running to grab a couple gallons just to throw in there to eliminate that. But at the same time, I did notice it was cranking really weird, so I'm going to do a relative compression test while I'm waiting and see what that looks like. It sounds strange, so we're going to see what happens here. Wait for it to cross. Well, that was interesting. Let's take a look at that. So, I don't know if you could hear that in the video, but it sounds terrible. Should probably put this on a different scale. Let's go. I feel like I'm missing every other cylinder there, to be totally honest. I should use a spark line and find out. There seems to be a big gap between those peaks. Like only one side of the engine has compression. I'm gonna look into this a little deeper and see. We might have additional issues going on with this thing. So this is with a spark sink. If you're just listening, there's a relative compression waveform, and the spark line on number 1, it's missing every other cylinder, so that's got to be 135, I imagine. I'll yank the plug and see if I can see anything, but I'm guessing timing is out on this thing if half the engine has no compression. I did think it was cranking a little weird, so multiple issues with this thing, but that's what you find with these things that probably came through an auction. We confirmed it was 135 passenger side, no cylinder had any compression on there. I tried to look at data PIDs while I was cranking, and the timing PIDs didn't change at all. I don't know that they're useful cranking. Not super familiar with Maserati, so who knows on that. It's not setting any codes either, but again, zero compression. So we yanked the plug, stuck a borescope down in there to see if there's any carnage, right? Did the valves hit the pistons? Did not look like it. So I told them, you know, you can put a little oil down in the cylinders. It's pretty odd that 3 on one bank are all 0. Like, you probably have a timing issue, so you may have to dig into it that way. And I considered doing a cam crank, but I don't have a known good for one of those either. So I talked with the shop and they agreed, hey, you got us pretty far. Number 1, there was a fuse missing for the fuel pump and for the all-wheel drive module. We have fuel pressure now, but then we've also identified why it's still not starting is half the engine has 0 compression. So they're going to dig into it and we'll get a conclusion on it, but we got them where we need to. So on to my last appointment for the day. Let's go. All right, last stop of the day. We got a 15 Volvo XC60. Their issue is that the trunk does not open from the button on the remote or from the rear hatch, but if you activate it with the scan tool, it will pop the rear hatch. They replaced the handle back there in the latch. I came out here a few weeks ago looking at this and got into it a little bit, trying to get towards the BCM, and they ended up finding there was standing water in this thing. And so what they've done is they've accessed underneath the carpet for me and they drained out all the water. So we're going to continue on with this, see if we can figure out why the trunk still does not work. And then I think that's the only issue that they have that they've identified so far. Of course, we got the sunroof, so got some water leaking, and I'm sure very possible to find something like that to do with it, but we'll dig in and I'll let you know what we find. So it says the trunk handle is unpressed even if I press it. And then I'm wondering about this trunk position sensor open in the data stream. I have to look that up and look at the circuit. So here we are at the BCM or the CEM for this thing, and I'm on the wire for the back handle, right? So it's the signal wire essentially, and when you press it at the back, there's nothing. I found there was no voltage on that wire, but there was ground on the back side. So there was ground, and the switch worked too. I could press it and I could get ground to come to the signal side, but there was no monitoring voltage. So I came up here to the BCM, and I actually do have voltage out of there. And if I take my grounded test light and I touch there, it pulls the signal down and it changes it from push to unpressed depending on my test light. So here's the problem. Even when I do that, it doesn't open the hatch. So I think I got 2 problems here. There's an open somewhere between there and the back of the vehicle, which kind of sucks because it goes under the carpet, and this again was a flood car. Didn't go the direction that I thought. It actually goes behind, and the harness for it comes at the left rear, so I don't even know the path that it takes. That's going to be a tricky one to find. I don't know how much it's worth my time though, because it still does not work with the button or the button on the dash. So there's something else going on too, and I have to try to figure out what that is. I'm running out of time for today, so we'll see how much more I got into this before I wrap it up and come back to it later. I did have some codes in the BCM that was preventing me from doing this. So the grounded test light on the trunk switch, I don't know if you can hear it, but when I do that, it works. So I started tracing this wire to see what harness it went to, and it went down this way, and oh, there it is. We got some green crusties, and this is where the water was. This is the splice point in the diagram. It doesn't tell you in the diagram where it's at, but we did locate it, and I think I'm gonna find out. So that splice point there, I think the keyless vehicle module also sends its signal to the central electric module when you hit the key, and then that. Now the only other thing is the switch on the dash. I don't know, I don't see that on this diagram. I thought it was this private switch, but I'm not so sure. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just twist all these wires together and then see what works and what doesn't. Okay, I'm making progress. By pushing all those wires together, the hatch release works. You pull the handle and it opens. Now, it doesn't work with the key, but the key is not exactly what you think it is. So I found here, you can press the remote and look at the body control module data PIDs to see what message it's getting. I just press lock, I just press unlock, I just press trunk unlock button is pressed. And this is in the body control module, which gets it from the keyless entry module. So the data is going there, but I was like, well, it's not opening it. Well, what I found was it doesn't actually open the trunk. It just allows you to open it with the handle, right? So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but if I lock the vehicle and then I come up to this, obviously this switch is not going to allow me in here. Now I can unlock the entire vehicle from over here, or I can just unlock the trunk. And when I do that and I walk up without the key, I can open the trunk. It's kind of weird, and I'm going to have to read up to see if that's the way it's supposed to be, but that's what it looks like to me, because when I press that, it registers in the body control, and then I can walk up and unlock it. Now, I can also just walk up with the key, and even if the vehicle's locked, do this, and it has a remote back here that detects that I have the key in the pocket. So the only thing left right now is the switch on the dash, but I'm wondering if that's the same way that this button may unlock, this one here may unlock the trunk so that you can pull it with a handle. So we might be fixed. I'm gonna just double check in the owner's manual that that's what that is. You'd expect it to pop open. I can't find a data PID for this switch though. That's the weird part. I also didn't see it on the diagram, so I'm a little lost on this one, but I'll have to look and see. So I talked to the shop, and they were pretty ecstatic that we got as far as we did with that, that the trunk works from the handle, which was their main thing. And if you have the key on you, it'll work when you go to pull that handle locked or unlocked. They're not too worried about the button on the dash or the button on the key. I still don't know if that's a normal operation or not. I'll probably do a little reading. There wasn't an owner's manual in this vehicle, but I might read up and see. It just doesn't quite make sense. But when I would lock the entire vehicle and be far enough away so the prox functions wouldn't work, and I hit the trunk button, leave the key away, and then walk up to the vehicle, I could then open the trunk. It just seems odd. Like, why wouldn't you just unlock the doors? I don't know. But anyways, got that relatively fixed. There's a splice under the carpet there on the passenger side due to water, due to sunroof, and that's just European car stuff. So that wraps up my day. Hopefully you had fun coming along. We'll see when we edit all this out how difficult or easy it is to follow. It obviously kind of sporadic through the day, but I thought this would be a really good day. Lots of diagnostics pretty much the entire day besides the one Ford module, and lots of weird cars, and Mercedes and a Volvo and a Maserati and all kinds of fun. So With that all the way, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.